Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first of hopefully many webinars that we will bring to you in regards to educating the general public and lot owners about the management rights industry. So I want to quickly delve into the reason behind why we have started these webinar series. And it is because over the last 5 years, I have really found when talking to owners that live in a community title scheme, I found that when I'm speaking with them, I don't want to say uneducated, but it's the fact that I feel like they don't know what they don't know, or they don't know where to go to find the information about where they are living and what they are actually living in the community, title scheme. So we are going to delve into different topics throughout each webinar that we speak that we have. But this was definitely one that I wanted to kick off with, and Trevor was definitely the person that I reached out to immediately when we knew this was the topic. So it's all about understanding the role of your on-site resident manager. So before we obviously get started, I want to introduce myself. My name is Kelly Rigby. I am the founder, admin, everything, seller, all of it of Rigby Property Group. We specialise in unit and townhouse sales. And then, of course, look, in the management rights industry, he really doesn't need an intro. But for those lot owners out there, Trevor Rawnsley is the CEO of ARAMA. He is pretty a household name in the managed rights industry. So he is the go-to for your resident manager when they need assistance. So it was a no-brainer, really, when I wanted to talk on this topic, who I wanted to invite. So I want to thank you, Trevor, so much, because I personally know how busy you are. So I really want to thank you so much for taking the time out to speak with us today.
No worries, Kel. You're doing a great job. Good start.
Thank you. Okay, so I will jump straight in to some of the questions I feel are really, throughout the 5 years that I have been speaking to lot owners, what really comes up the most. Like I said, we wanted to keep this within the half an hour. Trevor and I could probably talk for a full day on this, but I wanted to really hone in on sort of the basics of what goes on in a community title scheme and what a resident manager actually does and what it means. So the first question I have for you, Trevor, if you can help us out, is what is the role of a resident manager when it comes to their caretaking title? And I want to say agreement, but I'll let you delve into that a little bit as well.
All right. Well, look, thanks, Kel, and thanks very much for the invitation. Rigby Property Group do a great job, and this shows your continuation of providing outstanding service to your clients and those who are clients of your clients. So hello, everybody. I might take a step back and explain Strata 101. So Strata is different to living in the suburbs in that it puts people together, tenants together, unit owners together, investors together in a confined space called a community title scheme. Otherwise, they'd have nothing in common. So you're living with a neighbour, sometimes below or above or right next door, where you don't necessarily choose your neighbours. Very much like the suburbs, but the suburbs have more space. So there are a number of different ways that you can exist in that community title scheme. They are complex, which is why some people call them complexes. And what I do is I represent the management rights industry and provide service to people who have a business that's described as management rights. And so that's what Kelly's led with this morning as point one, is the realisation that a resident manager is somebody who lives or works in a community title scheme, which is a residential scheme. So it's not a warehouse, it's not a car yard, it's where people live, either as renters or as unit owners or holiday makers. They might reside there for a short period of time. And there's two elements to management rights. So it's a small business model where it's owned usually by an operator. Most commonly, it'll be a mum and dad And so if you're in a scheme that has a resident management couple, it might be a mum and dad, it might be a small business, but nevertheless, they're all small businesses, and they have two arms to it. They have a caretaking arm or property management arm, and they have an on-site letting arm, which is point two, the property management side. So the role of a resident manager as the caretaking service provider is to maintain the common area in a community title scheme. So trim the trees, as long as they're not too tall, require specialists, but, trim the hedges, mow the lawn, clean the driveways, clean the elevators, make sure that routine maintenance that doesn't require a tradesperson is done. It's usually tasks are usually outlined in a caretaking service agreement with the body corporate, and the caretaker is sometimes called resident manager, more often than not, sometimes called building manager, sometimes called rotten mongrel so-and-so. But basically, we have a job to do, and that job is to work on behalf of the body corporate as a contractor, just like Jim's Mowing or Pool Works or any of those other external contractors. But the advantage for the management rights business is they can operate as a caretaking service contractor on site. Often they'll be a unit owner, and so therefore they will be part of the community, and therefore they have a greater interest in making sure that the place is taken care of better than an external service provider.
Of course.
Do you want me to roll into resident property manager, Curl, or you want to?
Well, I have a question for you, because I know this comes up a lot when I'm chatting to those lot owners, and they might say to me, and I think, look, you've answered it, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway, is that they'll say, my manager, he comes, and part of his agreement is he comes and he changes my light bulb when I tap him on the shoulder. I see him out in the garden, and he comes, and he's so good, he comes and changes my light bulb. And that's all part of community living. And I want to explain that that's not actually a part of their agreement. Would that be fair to say that that's not?
Yeah.
That's just...
So if you look at your front door, that's the boundary of where a caretaking service provider would work. So everything outside the front door in the common area is covered by or should be covered by the caretaking service agreement. Anything inside, so from the front door inside, is covered by your property manager. Now, it might be that your caretaking service provider is also your on-site letting agent if you're a tenant, and also the property manager. But if you're an owner-occupier and you need a light bulb changed, that's the same as if you're living in the suburbs. You'd change your own light bulb. You shouldn't expect the caretaking service provider to do that for you.
No.
But as Kelly said, some might, and that's up to them. And whether they charge or not is really up to the two of you. But the advantage you have in being an owner-occupier is that you have someone on the job as the caretaking service provider who can help. If the relationship is good, it really comes down to mutual respect and the relationship. But it's part of a caretaking service provider's job to enter the lot, especially of a lot owner, and to do inside that lot. That's the responsibility of the lot.
Perfect. If they do it for nothing, it's just a good bloke sort of scenario. But okay, so we'll roll into the role of a resident manager as the property manager, so on-site property management. Yeah,
so this is where it gets confusing. I think we can work out you either get Jim's Mowing in to mow the lawns, and that's all they'll do, whereas the caretaking service provider can mow the lawn, clean the pool, take out the garbage, do a whole bunch of stuff in the common area. So the role of a resident manager as a on-site letting agent or a property manager on-site is that they look after the rental side of the business. So if you're a tenant and your letting agent lives on-site, then they're able to assist you in accordance with your tenancy lease, the same way that an external real estate agent might be able to assist you. The advantage in having a resident manager as your on-site letting agent is, again, they're on the spot. They're usually living there. They're not always living there, but they're certainly concentrating on that particular scheme. And they're across all of the apartments or all of the townhouses or all of the units, as well as the common area. So they know more than anybody else about the scheme. And again, They might have some obligations under the tenancy agreement as an agent, but in
Yes.
a lot of cases, the light bulb example, again,
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
responsibility of the tenant to replace those light bulbs. But
Yes. Yes.
see what happens if you get on well with your resident manager.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always good. And like you said as well, they're on site daily. They might, like you said, some reside on site, some are there. I know that a lot of people are actually there daily, which means that, if something does go wrong, which it's like having insurance, I kind of say, if something's going to go wrong, you want your on-site manager there to look after your investment property, because they can be, I've got many stories where things could have been catastrophic if the on-site manager wasn't looking after that property because they were there straight away. To help from harm. I know that we just had one in regards to a fire in Brisbane that was avoided by a resident manager because they were, it was a community and they were looking after that unit and were able to get in there straight away, which in itself that's a huge benefit. So my next question is, I guess, if we can ask, I know that you mentioned the contractor before. So is a resident manager, are they a bit of both? Is it an employee and a business owner, or are they one or the other, or both? Or how does that work as the agreement when they walk into a manager rights? Because they essentially are buying a large business.
Yeah, so a resident manager is a small business operator.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so a contracting service provider, and so they're not an employee.
Yep.
Although some resident managers may well work as an employee for large management rights operation. A good example of that might be a core.
Mm-hmm.
If you live in a
Oh, yeah.
building which has a core building manager, they're actually an employee of a core, but they're not an employee of the body corporate. And it's an
Yep.
important distinction to make. They do have
Mm-hmm.
a kind of job description. It's called a caretaking service agreement, and it should be specific. It's not always specific. So the point I
Okay.
want to stress here, Kel, is that no two schemes are identical and
Mm-hmm.
no two caretaking service agreements are identical. So how long that resident manager might work, what their hours are, what their duties
Okay.
are, can vary from one scheme to another. The best way to find out what are the responsibilities or how does that
Mm-hmm.
person go about their work is to talk to them. Understand that there is an agreement that they have with the body corporate. They're paid an annual remuneration to keep the place in good condition, but they
Mm-hmm.
don't work for an individual lot owner. They report to the committee, the body corporate committee. So if you're
Yep.
a lot owner, you are making a contribution through your levies. If you're a tenant, then think of them as you get two for the price of one. You get somebody who looks after the scheme and keeps it looking good, but also somebody who looks after you and your rental property on behalf of a unit owner.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So my next one, I guess, and we can probably throw some off each other here, but I said five top misconceptions of a resident manager. We've probably already touched on some, but I guess, what do you hear out there that I guess a resident manager or an on-site manager, what lot owners might have a misconception of our industry pretty much as well.
Yeah, so a lot owner might not understand what a caretaking service provider is
Yeah.
or what an on-site letting agent is, and might think that they can instruct the resident manager to come and do some maintenance in their apartment. So
Yeah.
that's a
Yes.
misconception. A
Yes.
tenant might be managed by an outside agent
Hmm.
and might then go to the resident manager and say, "Oh, can you help me out? I've lost I need a key cut or whatever," and they
Yeah.
can't. They're not
Yeah.
authorised to do that on behalf of the lot owner. That's your outside agent. You need to ring
Yeah.
Brittany, get her out in her 85 Ford Laser if she can find the scheme. So the
Yeah.
advantage is that if you're a tenant and the
Yeah.
on-site manager is not your letting agent, you should ask them why not. Please, you look
Yes.
like you're doing, the scheme, can you be? So there's
Yes.
misconceptions about who you are, and there's more
Yeah.
than five. But
Yeah.
from a unit owner's point of view, it's usually who are you and who tells you what to do and
Yeah.
what are your responsibilities. And
Yes.
those questions can generally get answered by understanding that they are a small business that provides
Yeah.
service to the body corporate, and that there's a service agreement that's like a job description. But if you're a
Yes.
tenant, understand if you're a tenant and your letting agent is the on-site letting agent, good for you, because you'll have a very good relationship. You probably met them before you came into the scheme. And that's where your rent goes, and they disperse it to the unit owner. But if you're the tenant of an outside agent, it can get even more confusing. So
Yeah.
understanding who your relationship with that resident manager is very, very important. That reduces some of the misconceptions.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. And I guess what can I do? And look, there's not many out there that I'm hoping that don't do their job. But if you do have a resident manager that you feel maybe isn't, performing to their agreement, I'm pretty sure we'll probably delve into looking into their agreement in this one. But what happens if I have a manager that I feel isn't quite living up to what they're meant to be doing in the caretaking side of things?
Yeah. So uh, living in strata is
Yep.
about relationships. So you don't need to have, uh, you know, lifelong, solid love affair with your next door neighbour. Probably better you
Yep.
don't. Some do. Good for them. But what you do need to do is understand that there is a thing called a triangle of management, which we might get to, and that it's
Yeah.
about respect and communication and being transparent. So let's go there now. So
Yeah.
it doesn't matter whether you're a tenant or a unit owner, but this particular triangle of management refers to unit owners. Tenants do have a role there, but this is about the three different points on the triangle, three different points of management. So there's
Yep.
a body corporate, the area in the middle of that triangle is the common area. And there'll
Yep.
be somebody called a resident manager, and I've described in broad terms their role. But there'll
Mm-hmm.
also be a committee that represents the body corporate. Now, what is a body corporate?
Okay.
That's the sum total of all the unit owners, whether they live on site, whether they are investor owners, you're a tenant. But basically, they're the owners of the scheme as the body corporate. And in many
Mm-hmm.
cases, the resident manager will also be an owner, a lot owner in a scheme,
Mm-hmm.
and a member of the body corporate and be on the committee. So there's a third person there who we haven't talked about today, but they're very important, and that is a body corporate manager. And the body corporate
Yes.
manager is someone who you may not see, especially if you're a tenant, you may not have anything to do with the body corporate manager, but they do have impact in the scheme because they administer the scheme and make sure they support the body corporate committee, they
Mm-hmm.
support the resident manager, and they make sure that the scheme is governed appropriately, that
Yep.
levies are sent out and recovered,
Mm-hmm.
and that important things that affect the administration of the scheme are carried out. So if you look at those arrows, double-headed arrows, that's
Yep.
the illustration of communication. So for a
Yep.
scheme to work well, if you're a unit owner, you need to understand there's a committee that you can elect and you can run for the committee, and I'd recommend you
Yeah.
do. And you need to have good relations with the other points of the triangle of management, the resident
Yep.
manager and the body corporate manager. And the
Yep.
resident manager and the body corporate manager need to communicate openly and honestly and have good relations. And you'll notice both the resident manager and the body corporate manager have a shared client, which is the body corporate
Yep.
represented by the committee. That's why they're
Yep.
at the bottom of the triangle and the
Yep.
committee is at the top of the triangle. So if you're a tenant, where do you fit in there? Well, you kind of fit in as part of the body corporate, but you're a tenant on
Yep.
behalf of the body corporate, but you're not a manager of the scheme. Tenants don't manage the scheme, and
Yep.
unit owners don't really manage the scheme, but they might represent the scheme as a committee member because that's their role. Resident
Yep.
managers, think of them as, in this context, a building manager, and think of the
Yep.
body corporate manager as the administrator. So that's the triangle of management.
Yeah, okay, perfect. So obviously I know that when I have spoken to lot owners before, they've been able to, if there has been a bit of, I guess, a little bit of conflict, where it's really has gone well is when they've actually just sat down with the manager, had a cup of tea or a whiskey or a wine, whatever's your your poison, and just had a chat about what it is, I guess, their role is, and have that chat with your resident manager and get to understand, because as you said, Trevor, every scheme is very different. Every agreement is so different. So if you are feeling that way, I agree, definitely, you can talk to your resident manager, sit down and say, well, and have a look at the agreement. You did mention with the agreements, if I can touch on it, that some of them are a little bit outdated. Is that right? That some of them are things may be a little bit different? Is that?
Yeah, look, it's not dissimilar to working in a corporate organisation, Kel, where sometimes job descriptions can be quite vague
Got
or
it.
non-existent. So,
Okay.
there is a caretaking service agreement attached to every management rights agreement,
Yeah.
but it
Okay.
may be in what we call generic terms, and
Yes.
therefore it could be open to interpretation. So, in
Hmm.
response to what do I feel if my manager isn't performing, need to understand what is your manager responsible for, your resident manager. What are they responsible for?
Yeah.
Are they responsible for washing a car on Saturdays? No. But you can ask them, and for a
Yeah.
fee, they do it. You never know,
Oh,
especially if you ply them with alcohol. That's always a good
yes,
thing.
you just need. Yeah, I have a funny story about the Saturday one, but we'll say it was
There you go.
yes.
So
Yeah.
understanding the responsibilities of your resident, getting to know
Yeah.
them, getting to know your resident manager is really important.
Yeah.
I've lived and worked with my family in a couple of buildings, and I've
Yeah.
made some really good friends as
Yeah.
tenants, as unit owners. And there's also some people I didn't really care for, and that happens. But certainly, what needed to happen is if somebody felt that I wasn't doing my job, I'd really like to know that, like any
Yeah.
customer service provider. So, talking to resident managers now, you should be seeking feedback from your tenants and from your unit owners to ask what you're doing well and what you're not
Yeah.
doing well. Send them a survey and don't be afraid of negative feedback. You can't improve if the feedback is always glowing with praise. It's nice,
Yeah.
but you can't improve. So certainly I would, if you're a unit owner and you're thinking that your resident manager is a bludger, understand that they may not be. They may just not be meeting your expectations. So
Yeah.
talking, communicating,
Yeah.
glass of wine is good, a cup of tea is good, being
Yes.
respectful, very
Yeah.
important, and that goes both ways.
Yeah.
And that goes a long way towards understanding their performance. And then if they're just not doing it, if the garbage doesn't go out on a Tuesday, that's
Hmm.
pretty clear. That'd be part of their role. So you'd say, hey,
Yeah.
is it my responsibility to put the garbage out or yours? And if they say,
Mm.
well, it's yours, so well, can I look? Can I get a copy of your caretaking service agreement? You're entitled to it if you're a unit owner.
Yeah.
Be nice about it,
Yeah.
and you might find that there is a passage there that says unit owners are responsible for putting out their garbage. So it's not a performance issue; it's more of a misunderstanding,
Yeah.
misconception.
Miscommunication. And exactly. And that's where I mean, I know we speak about it all the time, is communication. Communication is key. So I'm going to segue a little bit, because we were talking about, if you do have a manager that, goes over and above, is there an opportunity to, I guess, highlight a top performing resident manager, if you do have one in your scheme? Is there a way to, I guess, make sure that they shine?
Yeah, look, everybody loves praise. It validates that you're doing the right thing.
Yeah,
Kelly does a great
sure.
job with her clients. I'm sure she wants to hear it. It'd be nice, though, from Kelly's point of view, if her client said, I really would prefer you did this, that, or the other thing. And the same thing with ARAMA.
Mhm.
We survey our members regularly. We've just undertaken a huge industry survey, and that can happen at a local level. I talked about surveys, but I
Mhm.
also talked about if there is an opportunity to identify talent, then we look for that all the time. So ARAMA
Yeah.
runs an awards program every year called the Top
Mhm.
Awards.
Yeah.
It could be that your resident manager, we're in the middle of the Top Awards at the moment. It's being
Yeah.
the judging is being finalised now,
Mhm.
and your resident manager may be an entrant in the Top Awards. It's a self-nomination thing, but it's judged by a life
Mhm.
member of ARAMA. And if they are, and they make the final, they'll be sent a finalist certificate. And, we hope that they put that certificate in a frame in reception. And so
Yeah.
if you do notice where not just an ARAMA top award, but it might be a tourism award or it might be some other award, that you do recognise them. They've been rewarded for effort. It's very important to recognise and reward good performers. And so if you're a resident manager and you missed out on the top awards this year, there's always next year. But the top awards are designed to highlight, we call it outstanding performers, but just people doing their job. Kelly talked about a resident manager on the north side of Brisbane who saved a person's total life possessions by pouncing on a fire within minutes of it becoming evident. Now, if they were living in the 3 suburbs away, not available until 9 o'clock the next morning, then that scheme would have probably the whole scheme would have been. So little things like that, that's a great benefit. And they're not necessarily going to win a hero prize, but you should do something to reward your resident manager, or at least to recognise their performance as being quite outstanding. It's not normal. Same with floods. There's plenty of stories of, and I've done it myself, where knocking on doors at 3 a.m, the creek's just gone over and you want to get cars out of the car park and you're helping people in the rain at 3 a.m. We don't get paid for that. That's all part of the deal. And that's the benefit of living and working with someone who looks after the entire scheme.
Yeah, well, it's in the title, isn't it? Community title scheme. It's a community,
It is.
which is beautiful. So, look, we did have some questions come through. We've only got about 4 minutes left, as I did want to keep to the half an hour. Like I said, you and I could talk the whole day. But look, I did have one come through about is there who regulates, I guess, an on-site manager when it comes to licensing and things like that? Do they need a license?
Okay, so an on-site manager as a building manager is not required to be licensed. It's an unskilled job. It's a cleaner, garden guy, pool guy, or girl, guy. I mean,
all the hats.
All the hats, exactly right.
Yes.
All of those letters. So that requires a contract, and it requires some commitment to complete the tasks in the contract. But if you're an on-site letting agent or any kind of letting agent, whether you're on-site or off-site working with a big box real estate agency, or you're on-site in a mum and dad business, you are required to have a license. And that's a license as a real estate agent. And those licenses, real estate agent licenses, are regulated by the Office of Fair Trading. As a matter of fact, Kel, Office of Fair Trading have just invited ARAMA to form an inaugural consultative committee to introduce continuing professional development, compulsory professional development for licensees. So I do a lot of work with fair trading. I do a lot of work on behalf of the industry with government, and good governance comes about because they consult with industry, and that's what we do. We don't get on there just to try and gain a commercial advantage. That's not what it's about. We help them understand that strata is complicated, and one of the things that we'll be helping them understand is the kind of topics that a resident manager or an on-site letting agent would need to learn each year, so we can make sure we're teaching them the right things and that that's recognised in the compulsory professional development.
That's amazing. Well, that's great that you're sitting at that table because, like you say there, it is so complex. The managed rights industry, it's not the same as ABC Realty down the road in the office. There are different elements to it. So that is very, very exciting. Well, I will wrap it up there. I want to thank you, Trevor, so much for taking the time to come and speak with us. Any extra questions, please know that we will get to them over the next couple of days and through email, and I'll send them out to you. But thank you so much, Trevor. Thank you for your time. We will be in contact soon. Thanks everyone for coming along.